Yesterday, Grove Atlantic Press published a book entitled "Oh, What a Luxury," poems, pathetic, vulgar, profound, and something else. A collection of poems that I have written over the years. It's a collection of poems that is very hard to get published because the poems belong to a despised genre called light verse, and people hesitate to write that. Billy Collins writes light verse, but he gets away with it because he was an academic for many years, and so he is assumed to have some secret agenda. I used to write serious poetry, just so you know. When I was 19 and 20 and 21, I was serious about it, and I wrote poetry that was kind of nervous and jumpy and of course dark, of course, and that attempted to mine the unconscious by sort of skimming off words and phrases in the stream of consciousness and to hammer them into verse in a way that had no literal meaning, but and in fact I had no idea what they meant either, but other people seemed to like them, and so I wrote more of them. I assumed that insanity was the surest sign of brilliance, of literary ability, and the poet is a kind of a gaunt, haunted figure with deep-set, burning eyes on the verge of collapse. And we had models for this, John Barrowman being one, and there were certainly others who gave public readings in a state of advanced intoxication, and you looked at them and just wondered when they were going to collapse. But their intoxication and their self-destructiveness seemed to be bound up with their genius, both two sides, one dark, one light, of the same thing. This was what I thought the romantic idea of the poet as a crazy person. I assumed that I would die young. It just seemed like the honorable thing to do, and to die young, as James Dean did, and as Buddy Holly did, and Janis Joplin. Something of a problem if you came from Anoka, because you couldn't afford a fast sports car such as James Dean had, and nor to lease a private airplane as Buddy did down in Iowa, Clear Lake, and heroin was not easy to find in Anoka, and so you just sort of went along as best you could, but you wrote jagged and despairing poems, which for some reason it didn't bother me that I couldn't remember them even the next day. I couldn't remember a single line of them, whereas I still can remember, all these years later, the sonnets that I memorized in junior and senior high English, and loveliest of trees, the cherry now is hung with bloom along the bough, and whose woods these are, I think I know, his house is in the village though, and when in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes. Thank you. I all alone stand on a stage and forget a sonnet. But things change. And when you reach the age of 30, you're too old to die young now. And you have to figure out a way to live. And I got a job doing an early morning show on the radio. And early in the morning, though you yourself may feel despair, despair is nothing you have any right to offer to people who are listening to you. That's not your job, to grieve for yourself in public at 6 o'clock in the morning. You know that you're not supposed to do that. Your job is to be cheerful and to bring them up. And you learn at the same time, maybe not at 30, maybe by the age of 40, you learn the banality of despair and how boring it is, and how your loneliness is no different from anybody else's. There's nothing distinguished about it. And you go to high school reunions and you find out that everybody in your class considered themselves to be shy, misunderstood, and an outcast. You were in a large group of outcasts, and there's nothing original about this. And the cheerfulness that your parents exhibited, which you looked down on at the time as being sort of shallow and bourgeois and materialistic, you now see at the age of 40 is what 98% of the rest of the world would love to have if they only could have. To be a member of a stable, reasonably society in which responsible, reasonably people, until yesterday, in which responsible people respect each other, and in which prosperity is possible through industry and frugality, the old virtues. And then you turn to something else, and so I did. I set out to write a different kind of poem whose purpose is to amuse people. Cheerfulness, it's a choice. It's a choice. It's like the decision to wear a red tie rather than a black tie. It's just a choice that you make. Joy is a theological concept and may not apply to us here on earth. Happiness is something that happens, and if it does, fine. You know, if the Twins stage a rally in the month of September and they come from behind to beat Detroit and Cleveland and they win the championship, wonderful. But it's not going to happen, so put that out of your mind. Contentment, probably not. Bliss is of limited duration, about 10 seconds for the male, about 15 seconds for the female. Euphoria is chemical, and you don't want to mess with that. I had some when I had a wisdom tooth pulled, and Percocet, it's called, and it was amazing. You sort of associate the pulling of a wisdom tooth with agony, and because I come from the earlier stage of dentistry, you know, when the dentist climbed up in your lap and took pliers in your mouth, and he wore riding boots, and they were muddy, and his breath smelled of bourbon, and he wrestled you for this tooth. And now they give you a little IV, and they put a clear liquid into your veins, and a half minute later, it's all over. He's got the tooth out, and you're in a recovery room, and the nurse says, "Are you okay?" And you've never been this okay in your life. This is what my friends were searching for back in the 60s. They were out to find Percocet. They made the mistake of smoking this terrible reefer that smelled like burning creosote, and and pretending to get high from it. And it's what people were looking for when they made a martini. Unfortunately, they made a second and third martini, and they foundered. But you don't want this, you see. You don't want this. An intelligent person wants to experience all of life and not just a little narrow vein of it. You don't want to find a chemical happiness because it can so easily lead to the life of protoplasm, and then there's not much left of you. No, you want to be able to cheer yourself up. And this is how I cheer myself up right here.